Optimal minimalism.
At this altitude, I can run flat out for a half mile before my hands start shaking.
Can I answer your personal question?
Now would seem an appropriate time.
What if I did the opposite?
I'm a cybernetic organism, living tissue over a metal endoskeleton.
This episode is brought to you by FreshBooks. Thousands of listeners and a lot of the contractors I use and my readers use FreshBooks. If you've been thinking about turning your part-time side business into a full-time small business, or big business for that matter, you may be feeling some extra uncertainty these days, and that's obviously completely natural. There are a lot of questions that can come up. How do you create a professional appearance and experience? Who can help you with support? How do you manage the billing and all of that, but still focus on the primary work of your business and on growing your business? FreshBooks is an all-in-one invoicing and accounting solution. It does a lot more than that helps you take your business from part-time to full-time, and it only takes minutes to set up. They have one of the best sign-up flows in the business. I've seen very few better. They have been helping people turn their passions into small businesses for 15 years, and they can help you too. I've met the founders. I've looked at this product very closely. With automated invoicing, billable time, and expense tracking, and an intuitive dashboard that ties it all together, it's like having a full-time financial assistant with you every step of the way. You can create, customize, and send branded and professional-looking invoices in about 30 seconds. You get paid up to twice as fast with fees as low as 1% using ACH payments on FreshBooks. It's a fast, easy, and secure way for clients to pay you for your work and pay you more quickly. One of the many things that sets FreshBooks apart is their award-winning Toronto-based customer service. A real person picks up fast and will help you until you are completely satisfied and have your questions answered. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world right now, but your ability to build a business that you're passionate about, that you're proud of, doesn't have to be one of those things. Business owners all over the world rate FreshBooks as the easiest accounting software to use. Try it out. Check it out for free for 30 days at freshbooks.com/Tim. Just enter Tim Ferriss in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Again, that's freshbooks.com/Tim to check it out and try it for free for 30 days. One more time, freshbooks.com/Tim. This episode is brought to you by 5 Bullet Friday, my very own email newsletter. It's become one of the most popular email newsletters in the world with millions of subscribers, and it's super, super simple. It does not clog up your inbox. Every Friday, I send out 5 bullet points, super short, of the coolest things I've found that week, which sometimes includes apps, books, documentaries, supplements, gadgets, new self-experiments, hacks, tricks, and all sorts of weird stuff that I dig up from around the world. You guys, podcast listeners and book readers, have asked me for something short and action-packed for a very long time, because after all, the podcast, the books, they can be quite long. And that's why I created 5 Bullet Friday. It's become one of my favorite things I do every week. It's free. It's always going to be free. And you can learn more at tim.blog/Friday. That's tim.blog/Friday. I get asked a lot how I meet guests for the podcast, some of the most amazing people I've ever interacted with. And little known fact, I've met probably 25% of them because they first subscribed to 5 Bullet Friday. So you'll be in good company. It's a lot of fun. 5 Bullet Friday is only available if you subscribe via email. I do not publish the content on the blog or anywhere else. Also, if I'm doing small in-person meetups, offering early access to startups, beta testing, special deals, or anything else that's very limited, I share it first with 5 Bullet Friday subscribers. So check it out, tim.blog/Friday. If you listen to this podcast, it's very likely that you'd dig it a lot, and you can, of course, easily subscribe anytime. So easy peasy. Again, that's tim.blog/Friday. And thanks for checking it out, if the spirit moves you. This episode is brought to you by AG1, the daily foundational nutritional supplement that supports whole body health. I do get asked a lot what I would take if I could only take one supplement. And the true answer is invariably AG1. It simply covers a ton of bases. I usually drink it in the mornings and frequently take their travel packs with me on the road. So what is AG1? AG1 is a science-driven formulation of vitamins, probiotics, and whole food sourced nutrients. In a single scoop, AG1 gives you support for the brain, gut, and immune system. So take ownership of your health and try AG1 today. You will get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first subscription purchase. So learn more, check it out. Go to drinkag1.com/Tim. That's drinkag1, the number one, drinkag1.com/Tim. Last time, drinkag1.com/Tim. Check it out. Hello, boys and girls. This is Tim Ferriss. Welcome to perhaps the most impromptu tap dancing version of the Tim Ferriss Show that you will hear. I have with me my friend Sam Harris. I always enjoy speaking with Sam. We had originally planned to do a session at South by Southwest. That has been canceled, and we have been put into circumstances that may require or encourage different topics. The plan had been meditation, psychedelics, and dangerous ideas. I said to Sam before we hit record that I can probably use a fair dose of at least the first two in my life right now. But Sam, we were deliberating what to talk about, and I'll tell you an embarrassing fact, a secret of sorts. I have a deck of cards that I thought could be a lifeline if need be, called Three Things, which has prompts of different questions that I could ask you that I've wanted to ask you anyway. But how should we even frame this conversation?
Well, first, let me say that at this point, I'm committed to producing the worst episode of the Tim Ferriss podcast ever aired. So let's start there. I
appreciate your hardworking Protestant ethic.
Well, I mean, what's amazing, as you know, I also have a podcast, and I'm obviously speaking a lot about the coronavirus and our inept response to it and all the attendant concerns. But there's just this bewildering experience of having one's core interests sidelined and even just seeming patently inappropriate to air. I mean, I have podcasts on several topics that I just can't drop in the current environment. Actually, not because they're too frivolous and tone deaf in that way, but because they're on yet other emergencies or grim topics that I can't imagine anyone wants to pay attention to now, like, nuclear war or the prospect of nuclear war and nuclear terrorism. I mean, who the hell wants to think about that right now? And and to say nothing of things like, psychedelics. I mean, I don't know about you, but this does not seem like a moment to do a whopping dose of mushrooms or anything else with an invading virus looming in every corner of the world. I mean, talk about set and setting. It's the wrong both.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. So I feel like we should just have a conversation, and I can certainly grill you.
I should remind you of your tweet about who was it? I don't think you named the person, but someone in your circle said, we should drop. We should take ayahuasca or something and talk to the pangolin.
He said, I think it's time to take some peyote and talk to the pangolin. Right.
So that elicited a trollish tweet from me. I don't know if you saw that come across your radar.
Wait, I think it might have. What was your response?
I said, just spoke to the pangolin. Unfortunately, he's working for the bat, and the bat's an asshole. and that's...
Yeah, it is a tricky time to track down spirit animals in the psychedelic astral plane, for sure. You have to do contact tracing.
Right. That's right.
So I have these cards surrounding me. I am also committed to making the worst episode of the Tim Ferriss Show since its inception, which would match a lot of things that are hitting their worst since inception moments. But let me just throw a few out there, or one to begin with, and we'll see where that goes. And you can completely veto, and we can take it in a different direction.
Sure.
What are 3 things you have learned about fear? That is the question on the card.
In general, or based on recent events?
In general, in your life, or current events, any way you want to take it.
Yeah, a couple things. One is that it is certainly necessary. You wouldn't want to be without it. You wouldn't want to have your amygdala removed and simply be insensitive to kind of the fear-based initial response to stimuli or even ideas, right? So it's a necessary part of the toolkit for obvious evolutionary reasons and as well as personal ones. And many people imagine that if you get deep into meditation or some other spiritual practice, the goal is to get rid of fear and other classically negative states of mind entirely. And that's really not the way I view it. So you wouldn't want to never feel it again, but you want to be able to stop feeling it whenever it's no longer useful. And it really is only useful for a very short period of time. I mean, it's a signal of salience more than anything else. I mean, it's negatively valenced salience, but
What do you mean by that?
Actually, I should say that it's often thought that the amygdala really is just the kind of the fear center and doesn't do much of anything else. It's not just that. It really is more the salience center. It's when you're noticing information that really needs to be emotionally and behaviorally relevant, in the moment. So your response to scary faces, that would be a classic stimuli. You turn the corner and you see somebody staring at you and they look terrifying. That instantaneous, visceral perception of threat. You don't want to lose that, right? I can't imagine, being a social primate, however much I meditate, wanting to completely lose that. But what you want to then be able to do is let go of it the moment you're no longer served by seeing the world through that lens. And for so much of our fear that then grades into ordinary anxiety, it's just not useful. It's not useful to have stress of that sort become the mood music of your life, and which is what happens to so many of us, and it's happening to millions and millions of us in this moment around this pandemic. So, I mean, the first thing, I guess there are two things there. The first thing is that you still want this. This is a gift. This is not a curse, but it becomes a curse the moment you can't actually let go of it, more or less on demand, and you want to be able to do that. I mean, so that's certainly two things. And the third thing I would add is that you actually can do that. I mean, it's not, mindfulness is the method by which you would do that, and so that, there's a path to being able to do that more and more and more and more quickly.
Can you think of a moment for you or a situation in which you were experiencing acute anxiety or fear and used mindfulness as an intervention? Could you describe it, if so?
Yeah. No, it happens a lot. It's happening a lot in this circumstance. I guess, the one I remember very clearly was sort of the beginning of my taking the COVID problem seriously, and I forget when this was. This is the end of February at some point, somewhere in like February 25th or so, and I had ordered an iPad some weeks before when I was truly oblivious to what was going on, and it finally came, and again at this point I'm thinking thoughts like, wait a minute, how long does the virus live on a surface? I see that this thing is freshly minted in Shanghai and sent to me after they've clamped down on the Wuhan problem. I don't know what the likelihood is that I'm now opening a box of virus, but I've decided to open it after letting it sit for some days. So I'm opening this box, and I realize that I'm kind of double-minded about it, and in some ways just kind of in bad faith with the whole project. So, like, on the one hand, I'm taking precautions, right? I'm wearing gloves, but I'm not wearing a mask. I'm opening it carefully. I've decided to just wipe this iPad down with alcohol wipes. So on some level, I'm treating it like medical waste. But on another level, I recognize, wait a minute, I'm not doing this even remotely the way I would do it if I knew there was coronavirus in this box, right? So on some level, I'm kind of going through the motions, and I'm assuming that this is fine and that I'm actually being crazy. And this is kind of a pantomime of preparedness as opposed to the real thing. And it is the experience of kind of almost being double-minded. Like the person who's opening the box is not the whole person. And there's another part of me looking on saying, you're not really doing this correctly. And as witnessed by the fact that I'm standing in the middle of my living room and my kids are like, 15 feet away. And there's just in a flash, I recognized, okay, you're doing all of this. You've got the alcohol wipes, you've got the gloves on. You're acting like someone who thinks he's overreacting, right? You're just, again, in bad faith. You're not actually unified as just a behavioral system. And at that moment, I just got kind of flooded with anxiety over this whole kind of the scope of the whole crisis, like how difficult it had been for me to convince myself that the problem was worth responding to, all the people I'm in dialogue with, in my family personally and in my social circle, and then just in the public, the kind of public conversation that was starting around it. And I just realized how difficult it was going to be to change my own behavior and for everyone else around us to change our behavior in a way that was actually going to be effective. But at that moment, it was a very punctate experience of it, just like just cortisol, which is like, oh fuck, you do not have your shit together at all, right? You're in the middle of your living room opening a box of virus. You sort of think so, but you haven't done. It's like, again, my kids are like 15 feet away from me at this point, and so I just felt like a complete fuck up, But it was at that moment where I thought, okay, I am actually still pretty early. I took a kind of I don't know how to quantify the risk, but like, okay, wake up and actually get your game together here. And at that moment, from that moment onward, the anxiety is no longer useful. Right, like to be stressed out. I mean, once I've
the message has been delivered.
Yeah, it's 100% delivered, and the only time it's useful as any kind of holding pattern for me is when there's still significant uncertainty about what to do. So when you're at the border between what you're doing and what you don't understand, and you're trying to figure out what you should do, you can't figure out what your policy is. Then anxiety is the thing that's going to get you to keep focusing and figure it out. But once you figure it out, once you realize, okay, and you open the boxes outside, you wear gloves, you let them sit for however many days you decide to let them sit, you wipe things down that can be wiped down. There's no reason to be adrenalized at all doing any of that stuff as long as you know what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
And so that's and again, mindfulness is really the method by which you can let go of it, because you notice the thoughts, you notice this peripheral physiology of just the felt sense of being anxious, and you notice the connection between those things. And once you just let the thoughts go and just become willing to just feel the raw sensations of anxiety, the sensations lose their psychological import. I mean, it just feels like indigestion or itching or a pain in the knee or anything else that has no real meaning. It's just sensation, and it degrades over a half-life of really seconds. I mean, it does not stay around long. So anyway, that's the experience I remember, and obviously there've been many like that, but it's useful for a few seconds, and it's necessary for a few seconds. But then beyond that, you're just resurrecting it by what you're doing with your mind in the next moment.
I find your app, and I've said this to you before, Waking Up app, very useful for training for this. And in a number of the meditations, which are, at least in the introductory course, sequenced in a logical progression, a sort of building progression, much like you might hope to learn a language, starting with the basic building blocks and working your way up. There's a phrase that you use in a number of them with the snap of fingers, which is just drop it, right? And not viewing that as a hill to climb, not viewing that as something that requires a tremendous amount of conscious effort, but something that can happen in an instant. When you're opening this box, I'm glad you said iPad. I was wondering if it was just a box of bats or something.
Right. Might as well have been.
Got to cook those at a minimum of 400 degrees.
Right.
And then, is there something you say to yourself, in that moment to try to defuse the no longer useful anxiety? Is there anything that you point your attention towards, or is it just a reflexive act of mindfulness, much like someone like Jocko can reassemble God knows how many weapons in the dark with being woken up a half hour early, so at 4 a.m.
How long does it take to clean and reassemble the gun of mindfulness?
Right.
So I mean, there are reflections and concepts, pieces of language that can be useful. I don't, at this point, tend to carry many of those around. I mean, I might spontaneously think something that is useful. I mean, a bit of self-talk, but generally speaking, it really is just watching the present thought kind of unravel. I mean, the moment I notice I'm thinking without noticing a thought itself as an appearance in consciousness, the moment I notice I'm identified with, in this case, an anxious thought, then I can see the thought itself unwind in this larger condition, which is just open awareness, and so it is a kind of non-conceptual immediate pivot to that, or it's just kind of recognizing the circumstance from that point of view that happens. It happens whenever it happens. And there's on some level, it's not even, when I say one can do this on demand. On one level, that's true, but the experience of actually doing it is not really the experience of control. It's really just the experience of spontaneously recognizing what's actually already true of your mind, and you can't. You remember when you remember. It's like when do you? On some level, there's no accounting for why that moment dawns then and not a moment before or a moment later. But it's just the moment I notice. Oh, okay, that's a thought. Then the process starts without me having to really get behind myself and push in some way. But it's totally useful to think certain thoughts as a kind of antidote. I mean, there are people who have developed whole methods around that. I mean, it's kind of a stylized reflection. I think did you ever have Byron Katie on your podcast?
I haven't. I should.
Okay.
I've spent some time with her, but I haven't had her on the podcast. I do find a lot of value in her framework. The series of questions and prompts and so on that she uses.
Yeah, I don't know why I thought I'd heard you speak with her at some point, but I mean, she hasn't been on my podcast either. But I've met her and never spent much time with her work. But I know she does work this way, where she'll ask questions like, how do you know that's true, right? Like, which just throws everything back on this basic fact that in most cases, the thing we're worrying about hasn't happened, right? It's still hypothetical, and we're worrying about it as though that the hangman's noose is already around our necks, and this is a fait accompli, and there's nothing we can do about it. And if you actually focus on the present, there really is just whatever's given there and your thoughts about the past and the future, and that it does expose an interesting fact, which is either you can do something about the problem you're worried about, or you can't, and in neither case is your stressing out about it really warranted. I mean, if you can do something about it, well, then just do something about it. Solve the problem. And if you can't do anything about it, well, then why suffer twice? Right? I mean, you're suffering now before the thing arrives, and then you're going to suffer when it arrives. So on some level, you can decide to just, be with, even if something really is a fait accompli. I mean, even if a bad thing is going to happen and there's no way of avoiding it. I mean, one, we also know that we're very bad prognosticators about our future states of happiness and misery, right? So we tend to totally exaggerate how much we're going to be shifted with respect to our moment-to-moment well-being. We overestimate how positive something's going to be, and we overestimate how negative something's going to be. And as we know from a lot of psychology and behavioral economics, people return to baseline fairly quickly, even from extraordinarily bad and good things happening to them, and most of the time spent, worrying about even objectively bad things is still fairly delusional. I mean, we're just not actually mapping the future that will in fact arrive at some point.
Sam, I'm just curious to know, say in the last, it's arbitrary, last few months, last year, what have you changed your mind on? What positions have you modified or reversed? What insights you had that have sort of rendered past beliefs perhaps outdated? What have you changed your mind on in the last few months or year that come to mind that are really, it could be anything, material or otherwise?
Well, I feel like under the pressure of this pandemic, many things are shifting for me. I think it's probably happening for most people, but I'm not actually consciously scoring all the changes, as they're happening. But I'm noticing kind of a shift in my orientation, and maybe I would shift back. But for instance, as you know, I've spent a lot of time criticizing what I perceive to be bad ideas, and even criticizing the people who I perceive to be purveyors of bad ideas. And so, in political space, I can get into some fairly heated arguments with people, and with the possible exception of President Trump, I've pulled back from, with the actual, with the noted exception of President Trump, I've pulled back from that a lot, just because it strikes me as really counterproductive. So there are people who are saying some truly idiotic things about coronavirus, and insofar as I've engaged them in public, I've tried to be, fairly. I mean, it's a fairly light touch, and then I have done a lot of kind of private. I've attempted several private exorcisms, because I haven't wanted to go after these people in public and get them to just dig in, based on their own, egos or concerns about not being shown to be wrong or whatever it is. And I must say that the results are impressively mixed. I mean, I've become less and less hopeful that even fairly smart people are open to rational argument, even when it would serve their interests and everyone else's interests. I mean, it's the communication failures around this are pretty spectacular. And I mean, so one thing I've changed my mind about, at least provisionally. I mean, I would love to be proven wrong here, but just as a matter of being able to achieve some kind of political consensus around large problems, I've become far less hopeful than I was. I mean, when I think about the prospect of convincing people about climate change and the need to respond to it, when I map on our failure to respond to coronavirus with the alacrity that was required, when I map that onto the problem of climate change, something that is so abstract, even in with one hot year following another, even with one superstorm following the next, when you can't really attribute any one change in the weather to this, concern about climate, and it's in general just a slow-moving catastrophe about which there's still some significant difference of opinion, even among scientists, not enough to discount the problem, but certainly more than around the epidemiology of coronavirus, right? And yet we can't even get on the same page around this. It makes me think that the solution for climate change has to be surreptitious at this point. Like there is no political solution. We actually simply have to design, products and sources of energy that people find more desirable, and we just Tesla cars being the perfect example. Like at a certain point, people just people just need to want electric cars more than they want gasoline cars for reasons that have nothing to do with climate, just because they're better cars. And we have to innovate on dozens of fronts in that way, and just do whatever we need to do to mitigate the problem, despite the fact that we can't persuade anyone that is even a problem. Because the persuasion problem now just strikes me as insuperable. So, I mean, that's kind of a very pessimistic epiphany I feel like I've had, but I just cannot believe how hard it is to talk to even very smart people about what's happening with coronavirus.
Yeah, it can be very disheartening, and not to say that I am right or accurate in all things related to coronavirus, but certainly have faced a fair amount of flack for speaking publicly about it, which is totally fine. People have a right to disagree, and I suppose if I'm trying to look at the silver lining in our inability to communicate, that might be a strange way to put it, is that perhaps our inability to solve one problem, like a pandemic, will in some ways help us to address or at least slow down man's contribution to climate change, because it'll just paralyze transportation and factories and many different large-scale forms of sort of carbon contribution to the atmosphere. So there's that.
Yes, it is definitely improving our air quality for the moment.
Anything else that comes to mind that you've and perhaps another way to frame it would be anything that you've been particularly surprised to learn or excited to learn about in the last year?
Well, this is something that you and I have talked about, I don't think in public. I mean, this actually would have been the thing we would have spoken about at South by Southwest. But having psychedelics come back into my life after what it was definitely more than a 25-year hiatus. I mean, it was at least 25 years. I think, approaching 30 since I took a whopping dose of anything. And it wasn't really on my radar to do again. I forget what the proximate cause. I mean, certainly your own recent adventures in that area were part of it. I mean, just it's sort of in the air it's been in the air for many people in recent years. But and I guess just the fact that it's now a topic of very promising research. Again, significantly inspired by your commitment to it.
And you did excellent. You have an excellent podcast interview on your podcast with Roland Griffiths, also.
Yeah, he was great.
Johns Hopkins, where you talked about crocodile rape, among other things,
yes.
Or rape by crocodile, I believe it was.
Yes, the often unacknowledged threat of being raped by a crocodile. But happily, I've escaped that. But I have not done DMT. That's one thing I haven't tried. But so I managed to convince myself to do mushrooms. A larger dose of mushrooms than I've ever done. In the last year, and again, it had been over 25 years since I had done anything significant. I hadn't done a lot of mushrooms when I was doing psychedelics. I mean, I had done I'd done them several times, but never at a very significant dose, and never blindfolded the way or in the dark the way Terence McKenna always recommended it. And I was a distant fan of Terence's for while he was alive. I actually met him once very briefly. I mean, I didn't actually know him, but so I view that as a missed opportunity, because he really had a beautiful mind, and I've listened to a ton of his stuff, and he's just perhaps the most entertaining speaker we've ever had on any topic. But I mean, I should say that probably half of what he said was fairly crazy. I mean, or at least like half of what the views to which he was strongly committed, I consider to be fairly crazy, and some disproven.
Yeah. It's
so-
very, very entertaining. Yeah, absolutely. Continue.
Yeah, I mean he's a great example of it. It almost not even mattering whether someone's right, because they're such a good speaker. But and he just again. So I didn't know him. I just met him once, very briefly, in 1992. He died in 2000. So I certainly could have hung out with him and just didn't. And but that was a period where I was getting really into meditation, and also I was taking psychedelics, but usually LSD. But then I just stopped because meditation became the center of the bullseye for me, and it still is. But after that many years, I just felt like there was something I wanted to experience in the psychedelic space, and I recognized that I had never taken mushrooms in the way that Terrence and others had always recommended, and so I wanted to experience that. So I was surprised to decide it was suddenly relevant to do that, and then kind of surprised to do it, and also very happy to have had the experience I had and find it to be as useful as I found it to be. So there was kind of just a kind of reaming out of the pipes of my mind that seemed very useful, and I think I will certainly do that periodically. I mean, I think it's I didn't come away from that experience feeling like, okay, I never need to do that again. That was I'm done. It really did seem like by no means the same thing as meditation. I mean, it can be easily harmonized with it, but it's just not. It's just a different project on some level, because in terms of transcending yourself, getting rid of this illusion of being the subject, or being the vulnerable, little man riding the horse of consciousness. You can do that without any of the pyrotechnics of the psychedelic experience. And conversely, I'm convinced you can have a fairly transcendent, transcendently beautiful or harrowing, depending, psychedelic experience without losing the sense of self, or at least, it's not that the experience isn't characterized much by a true transcendence of self. It's just your perception is vastly altered, and your conceptual framework is vastly altered, but you're still a subject now, either enjoying or suffering the consequences of having your nervous system, driven from below by the pharmacology. So it is different, and again, there's no contradiction between them. But anyway, I came away feeling like, it just renewed my interest and commitment to it. But it's hard to imagine doing it in the current environment. I must say, it's like there's so much that is now being held in abeyance by this lack of normalcy. I mean, I find it very difficult to even articulate what seems to have happened here. I mean, on some level, my day-to-day experience is changed very little. I count myself very lucky as someone who I can basically do all the work I was doing precisely as I was doing it and be essentially quarantined, right? I mean, I was working from home anyway. My team is completely distributed, so there was nothing to change there. All my work with them has always been in Slack and on the phone and by email, and so it's like nothing has changed, and all I have to do is release podcasts and finish a book, and nothing's changed. But yet, on some level, everything has changed, and I feel like I'm in a spaceship where at any moment the breach in the wall can be catastrophic. And it's a very bizarre feeling, which I know everyone is sharing to one or another degree.
Question about your psychedelic experience. Well, actually, several. The first is related to a 5-minute or so, maybe slightly longer, 5 to 10 minute afterward that you appended to the Roland Griffiths conversation on your podcast, which was a description of your 5-gram dried mushroom experience, which I thought was absolutely beautiful. Is that available, or do you have any plans to make it available outside of the app?
I think actually we are just, it's either on YouTube now or it's going to be released with some video backing to it. I think like a something like, a great, cloud photography or something. But there's something, it was just an audio track, but we've illustrated it with some video, and then that should be released very soon if it's not already out.
Great.
Yeah.
What would people search to find that? Or what might they search?
I'm sure it'll be on my YouTube channel, and it'll be something. I'm sure Mushroom Trip will be in the title.
Sam's excellent journey.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Not Sam not being raped by a crocodile.
Sam and Sam's excellent journey.
Yeah.
If you guys want the crocodile rape details, you're going to have to listen to the Roland Griffiths conversation.
Yeah.
The second question was related to carryover effects, if any, that you have observed after recording that description of your experience. Did you see any persistent changes to your perception, behavior, or anything else? Not necessarily permanent, but persistent for a period of time, whether days or weeks. Did you observe anything like that?
Yeah, it's and this has always been true of my experience with psychedelics, and unfortunately, it has gone in both directions. I mean, so when I had, back in the day when I had some very unpleasant acid trips, which finally convinced me that taking acid was essentially just like a spin of the psychological roulette wheel that you just don't know what number's going to come up, and at that point the negative side was coming up enough that I just thought, okay, this really just isn't worth it. And it was especially not worth it because I felt that the knock-on effects of having that experience for 10 or 12 hours lasted for weeks and even months. Like I just felt like, so when I would have a good trip, which is to say a truly expansive, beautiful trip, the after effects of that were in the same register. I felt more expanded and with a greater purchase on a heightened sense of beauty. And that would last for quite some time. But, conversely, the kind of contracted, neurotic, kind of shame encumbered space that I would experience in a bad trip would also leave some residue for some period of time. So I felt like a worse person for weeks or even months after some of those trips. And so that's why I kind of got out of the game. But this trip was, almost entirely positive. So yeah, as a kind of emotional and perceptual reference point, I felt I felt better in many ways afterwards, and I think I probably still do. I mean, again, it's not permanent in the sense that it's not that it has blocked every other state of consciousness from arising thereafter. I mean, so after that trip, which now is several months old, I've experienced anxiety, I've experienced fear, I've experienced anger, I've experienced everything is still on the menu. But as a reference point, it has stayed pretty vivid. So it's easier to convince yourself that, like, when you've had an experience like that, and this really is the reason to take psychedelics, even if you are convinced that they're unnecessary and that they're neither necessary nor sufficient, right? So that they're even if you're convinced that meditation is the only way to really transform your mind in the way that you want to, the thing about psychedelics is that it can give you, and as each in different ways, they can give you an experience of states of consciousness for which there is no possibility of skepticism. As a meditator, for the longest time, for forever, so that it can just torpedo the whole project, you can remain fundamentally uncertain as to whether or not there's a there. It's like is this really going to work? Is there really something to notice here? Does life ever really get any better than it's been in the last 5 minutes? Is there anything to realize, or maybe I'm just fooling myself, right? Like all of it, you can cycle in that space of doubt for years and years, and get absolutely nowhere. But 5 grams of mushrooms, if nothing else, prove to you that it is possible to have just an unrecognizably different experience of consciousness, and that's available given the requisite stimulus, right? And the drug doesn't get your brain to do something that your brain isn't capable of doing, right? It's not like you've been given a different brain. The same serotonergic system that is being leveraged by psychedelics is always there working for you, and it gets leveraged in every moment or not, based on how you use your attention and based on the kinds of the collisions you have in the world, and everything else you're doing neurophysiologically. And it's just absolutely possible to have a very different moment-to-moment experience of the world. And most of us, I consider myself among the untalented people who really probably just would not have seen the merits of meditation, but for the fact that I had a psychedelic experience, in that case with MDMA, which just proved to me that there had to be a there. That people, in the various contemplative traditions who were talking about things like unconditional love, they weren't making this up. They weren't just epileptics or frauds. This is a real continuum of human consciousness that is there to be explored, and you just have to figure out how to make your mind adequate to that project. And psychedelics definitely reveal that.
It is just incredible how different the experiences can be on different compounds, even though they may fall or be thought of as falling into the same category of, say, psychedelics. To take two, which are often thought of as close cousins, and on some level they are similar, but you take, say, LSD, which is, from a receptor standpoint, quite promiscuous, with the duration of effect that you mentioned, which can be really long, right? 8 to 12 hours, which on one hand, it's tempting to say, well, that's Earth time. It doesn't really matter. Just like when people say, oh, I'm going to do DMT because it lasts 5 to 15 minutes, I don't think that's the proper way to frame the decision or think about it, because that could feel like 1,000 lifetimes strung together in terms of your subjective experience of those 15 minutes. But nonetheless, say LSD, just in terms of duration of effect, and then you look at, say, mushrooms, 4 to 6 hours generally. There are different species, of course, and all sorts of variables. What I find, and what many people find difficult about LSD, there are a few things. Number one, it is so potent on a microgram level that it is easy to misdose. And the difference between 100 micrograms and 200 micrograms is hard to overstate how different those two experiences can be. And that is a drop, less than a drop. I mean, depending on how it's being administered.
Right.
And then I think what makes, for many people, and I'd be curious to hear your perspective on this, but mushrooms somewhat easier to navigate, is that the on-ramp and the off-ramp, the on-ramp is a little longer generally than LSD, so the full onset and peak of effects if you're looking at the pharmacokinetics. But the off-ramp is generally, for most people, going to be a lot faster than LSD, in the sense that with LSD, you might have, and many people do have, the experience of being fully journeying in some transcendent psychedelic experience, dissolution of the self, etc., for 4 to 5 hours. And then there is this tail of an additional 2 to 4 hours. And there are a fair number of people who will have 24-hour plus experiences. I don't know, who knows what the exact percentage of the population is, but having volunteered at Zendo, which is a psychedelic harm reduction volunteer outfit at places like Burning Man and so on, let's call it 1 in 30 people would be my estimate, have a 24-hour plus response. But let's just go with the majority. You have this tail end of 2 to 6 hours where you are not sober. You are absolutely not sober. You're still very malleable and everything is intensified, but you are not journeying. And so I find that in-between space can be quite challenging to navigate, because for a lot of folks that they've taken the eye mask off, maybe the music's playing, maybe they're trying to eat crackers with their friends, and then they have this huge surge of shame or other intense emotion.
Yeah.
But intellectually, they think that they are in control, so to speak.
Right.
And that can cause all sorts of difficulties that can persist, as you mentioned.
When you're eating a cracker with both hands, that's a telltale sign that you're you're not yet fully in control.
Right. Yeah. If you're holding your Triscuit with more than
Yes.
eight fingers, it's
Right.
probably a sign that you're not fully sober.
This gets to an issue of on some level, a dose that's too small runs a liability that is, on some level even greater than a dose that's too large. Or at least, I mean, this is the way I've begun to think about it based on my experience. It's just first we should say that for psychedelics like psilocybin, mushrooms, and LSD, you're nowhere near a lethal dose of the compound at any dose you're liable to take. Even the most aggressive and psychologically destabilizing dose, physiologically is not likely to be toxic for you. Mm-hmm. So that's not an argument for taking as much as you can get your hands on. It's just that these are physically very safe drugs. And I would definitely not say that of MDMA. I mean, MDMA you can clearly overdose on, but
you can clearly die. Hyperthermia. Yeah. I've seen people in the same volunteer capacity at different events, 104, 105 degree temperatures, which is how you melt your brain, and can die, certainly. Ibogaine or Iboga also can have some severe cardiac complications, and people do die of cardiac arrest using Ibogaine and Iboga. So you really have to know your compound. But psilocybin and LSD have effectively no known LD50, meaning a dose that would be expected to kill, say, 500 of 1,000 people in a room if they were given that dose, which can be established for lots of things, including some common drugs like acetaminophen, which can be very dangerous. So
right. So it's not. And again, I'm sure people have had heart attacks and strokes and other, even fatal events on LSD or psilocybin, and maybe as a consequence of what's happening for them psychologically, being part of that. But it's just that we just know that the drugs themselves are physically very well tolerated, and so it's that's not the concern. But now I've forgotten why I got into that.
Let's see. I was talking about the duration of these two
compounds.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So sorry.
And then we're talking about Triscuits, eating it with 10 fingers.
Right.
Indicative of not being sober. Yeah.
So the reason to take more rather than less for me, or the reason why, just kind of imagining you're just going to get your toe in the water. I'm leave aside microdosing as its own thing. I'm not talking about that, but like the reason why maybe 5 grams of mushrooms could be better than 2 grams of mushrooms for somebody is that, and you can do the arithmetic for LSD there, is that taking enough reliably launches you past all of your personal psychological content, right? I mean, the place I don't like to be, and the place I don't recommend people spending much time, is in the domain of one's personal concerns, life concerns, the kinds of thoughts that besiege you when you sit down to meditate. To stay on that strata of your mind with this turbocharged experience of psilocybin or LSD, driving you there. That for the most part, I mean, you obviously can have personal insights, and you can have kind of breakthroughs with respect to your relationship to other people. I know that's the case, but generally speaking, it is a recipe for a lot of seemingly very personal anguish, which you can actually bypass if you go far enough out, and then you have a truly transcendent experience. At least transcendent in the sense that what you're in contact with doesn't have a reference point in your life, right? You're not thinking about your mom or your wife or on the way out you might be, and on the way back you might be, but where you land when you're actually at the peak is a place that doesn't have those kinds of reference points. And again, it can be very, very beautiful, or it can be very, very painful. I mean, doesn't guarantee a quote good trip, but it's that for me, that's the real opportunity of true psychedelics. Unlike something like MDMA, where to be working on your relationships and to be thinking about specific people in your life, or even relating directly to them, that seems like a totally appropriate use of that tool.
I agree. I think MDMA is better described as an empathogen than a psychedelic. I don't think of it as a psychedelic at all. There's some dispute over how to apply that term to different things, but I would add to what you said that the analogy I use, I guess metaphor, quite a lot when discussing this with people is that of airplane taxi and takeoff, and the experience of popping through the clouds. So you have this taxiing period, you're waiting, you have this acceleration, takeoff, a slight amount of turbulence, and then very often as you go through cloud cover, you have even more turbulence, and then you pop through the clouds, and you have hopefully a smooth ride, or at least a ride from a very, very, very different vantage point. And to your point about dosage, if we're talking about, say, mushrooms, one of the psychological risks of underdosing, and which is quite common because people are understandably nervous, and very often this is done in settings where people do not have a sitter, which I always recommend against, meaning if someone doesn't have a sitter, they're likely to want to dose more conservatively, and in doing so often take something, let's just say in the 1 to 2 gram range, and end up stuck in the clouds in turbulence, and they never quite pop above the clouds into a transpersonal, or even if they still have the identification of I, what constitutes I changes quite a lot.
Yeah.
Right. In the psychedelic experience, you can have complete ego dissolution. You can have complete, what I would perhaps call disassembly at higher doses, where your experience does not resemble your ordinary waking reality in any sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
Time, dimension, language all disappear. I disappears, etc. But ratcheting that down, you can have the experience of I Tim, am experiencing these various things, but what constitutes I and the boundaries that normally exist in your waking life that separate you cleanly from the external world are very permeable, very different. And the related point with, say, LSD is that on the descent, instead of just going straight through the clouds, you sort of hang out in the clouds, or can, for a pretty extended period of time. And that is where you can come out of a beautiful transcendent experience. And this is not, by the way, a knock on LSD. I think it's a tremendously interesting tool for the right people with the right supervision. But there is a tail end where many people perceive their journey to be over, where very messy personal material can come up with strong emotional charge, and they're simply not. They've taken their seatbelt off and they're going to get their luggage out of the overhead compartment, and they're still in the clouds. They just don't realize it, you know. It's these things are very, very strong. They can be very powerful. So I always advise caution with these things.
Even in the best case, when you're talking about the come down from, let's say, LSD, let's say you've had a perfectly expansive, beautiful, transcendent trip, and then you're coming down. What I remember from those experiences, and probably the first 10 acid trips I took were literally had not a single moment where I could even understand what was meant by the concept of a bad trip. I remember being the guy who was thinking, what are people talking about? A bad trip. Like, there was no, I couldn't figure out where would you point your finger to in which direction could you possibly go in that experience to wind up someplace bad. I mean, it just made no sense to me. And then on some subsequent trip, it made all too much sense.
Famous last words.
Yeah, exactly. Talk about hubris. But even from these trips, I remember coming down. The experience was one of feeling my mind encumbered by the very, artifices and structures and kind of diversions of attention, concerns, psychological concerns on some level that block the expansive experience I had just had, right? So, you come down, you like one moment you feel like Jesus, and the next moment you begin to notice the reasons, the kind of rapidly accruing reasons why you're not quite qualified to be Jesus, right? And if you're in relationship to people, I mean, if you're actually having a conversation with someone who you were just tripping with, say, all of that begins to fall into place in dialogue with others. I mean, and you notice your neurosis, or at least your potential for neurosis, to kind of get reconstructed in front of you, as you moment by moment. And that, I remember that being painful. I mean, just to witness kind of the capture of my attention in something that, moments before would have been unthinkable, right? And
you go from Jesus to Woody Allen in your own head in about 60 seconds.
Yeah. Right. And you've got bad hair in either case.
I just envy anyone with hair. So that's where I am.
Right. There is no bad hair.
Yeah, I hope at some point. I mean, this would be quite a distance in the future, I would imagine, that we will actually have scientific studies looking at the combination of these compounds, for instance, using MDMA or other empathogens. There are quite a few that could be used as an on-ramp for, say, LSD therapy or psilocybin, and combination therapy that I think could be very, very interesting. We don't yet have the data we need and want for these compounds in isolation, so I think that's a fair distance in the future, but I look forward to the day when more of that can be done.
Right. Yeah. The one thing I'm looking forward to, which I mentioned at the end of this addendum that is at the end of the podcast with Roland, there was that one study done combining a meditation retreat with a high dose psilocybin experience, and that for me seems like a great marriage. I mean, just to prepare people over the course of a couple of days with mindfulness practice, and I'm sure there's some way to optimize this protocol. It wouldn't just be straight silence. I mean, there might be some reflection about what's coming, and then some integration period. But just to actually kind of systematize a retreat-like approach to doing a high dose psychedelic experience that seems very promising. There are people who are doing it. What do you guess?
Oh no, I'm laughing because I'm just imagining. I did a silent retreat at Spirit Rock, and there were 200 people sitting in this meditation hall, and I was just thinking, if you had 200 people doing a high dose psychedelic journey in one room, it would be anything but a silent retreat.
Right. Yeah. It's a very crowded retreat.
It might not have been 200, but I would say at least 80, somewhere between 80 and 100.
Yeah, I think it's about 100 up there, yeah. So how you physically, how you arrange the environment and how you keep people in their own space and give them adequate guidance and all of that, I don't know how that's brought off. I know there are places that are doing it. There's one in Jamaica. There's one in Holland. I mean, there are a bunch of these places, and there's one in Mexico. A bunch got in touch with me after this podcast. As far as I can tell, none are really as locked down in their protocols as I mean, they didn't seem like places I could recommend based on what I could see of what they were doing.
No Facebook ads with your face for psychedelic retreats anytime soon.
Someone may have produced some, but they're not authorized. So if you see any, let me know.
Yeah, one comment I want to add as it relates to difficult psychedelic experiences or psychedelic experience overall is there is a common pattern among first-time or relatively novice users of psychedelics to develop somewhat of a messiah complex after they've seen the promised land.
Yeah.
And they have one experience or two experiences. Very often it's after one. They have this profound transformative experience and they become a proselytizer for psychedelic use. And grandma, you need to do ayahuasca. Little Johnny, nephew Johnny, you need to do ayahuasca, etc., which is at best irresponsible and also very, very dangerous. And so my recommendation to people who are experimenting with psychedelics or considering it, number one, the legal side effects can be just as great as any other side effects. So I'm not advising, nor is Sam, that you break the law. Secondly, if nonetheless you are going to experiment, I would ask that you put enough mileage under your belt to at least once be, as I sometimes say to my friends, tumbled and humbled before you are given your card-carrying capabilities of proselytizing psychedelics. It's my strong feeling that you need to have not what I would consider a bad trip, because I only distinguish between safe and unsafe trips, not good and bad. I think some of the most valuable experiences you can have are exceptionally difficult psychedelic experiences in exceptionally safe circumstances.
Right.
But if you're simply getting the sort of unicorns pissing rainbows version of the psychedelic experience, and those are your first 3 or 4 innings, keep going. Possibly, safely, obviously, until you have a harrowing, holy fucking shit experience that takes you a while to digest and process before you run around like the town crier telling everyone they should do psychedelics.
Yeah. I think that's good advice, because there's no way to appreciate how difficult a, quote, bad trip can be unless you've had one. right. And in fact, if you've only had good trips, you're almost the worst judge of what is possible for somebody else, and even for yourself at some future time point. So, yeah, I mean, that was I was actually one of those people, back in the day when I first, because I was taking psychedelics the first time around before. I was kind of in this weird cohort because I was, in my peer group, I was kind of the only person doing what I was doing. I mean, when I would go on a meditation retreat when I was, 20 or 21, there were no other 20 and 21-year-olds on these retreats. I mean, everyone had kind of been through the 60s, and so I was surrounded by 40 and 50-year-olds who had been doing this stuff for 20 years or so, and so it was with psychedelics. So when I got my hands on MDMA, it had come out of ecstasy. It had come out of the therapeutic community right after it was a couple of years after it was made Schedule 1. But I didn't know anyone. I mean, perhaps there were many people my age taking it, but I just wasn't aware of it. I didn't know anyone who had taken it. So when I got my hands on psychedelics and meditation and the combination of all of these esoteric things and kind of rebooted the 60s for myself, I was
your private revival of the 60s.
Exactly. I was a one-man Grateful Dead tour. Without ever getting into the Dead, but I just was not meeting. There was no one in my world who knew anything about any of this stuff. So, yeah, I was kind of proselytizing, and I guided many people on psychedelic trips. But I just branded myself somebody who was qualified to do this after half a dozen acid trips. And nothing especially bad happened, but obviously I didn't have the experience that one would want to have to actually be doing that, and it's a little bit like what happened to me when I got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, the moment I got into that, it was like every conversation had to be about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And that lasted until I got, injured, and So now I have a slightly different conversation about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
You should really try it. Oh wait, I didn't tell you.
Wait,
last week I had both of my Achilles tendons torn. Asterisk. It's. Psychedelics are still endlessly fascinating to me. They have not in any way lost their fascination for me.
But what about in the current environment? I mean, can you imagine tripping now, or does it just seem like at the risk of setting?
Well, at the risk of being really negligent or irresponsible, I will say that I cannot say I'm going to word this like a lawyer would. I cannot be 100% confident that there would be no value in safe and responsible use of psychedelics during these times. In part because these times are not going to be. This is not a.
It's not 2 weeks.
This is not a 90-minute movie that we're watching. Yeah. This is going to be an extended period of time, and I think there could be applications for people who have a lot of experience. I don't think this is necessarily the time to decide you're going to find some homebrew instructions for ayahuasca plus ingredients on the dark web and do a solo journey into the dark night of the soul. I don't think that's a good idea by any stretch of the imagination. But for people with a lot of experience, I do think there could be applications. There are probably more applications for something like MDMA, which allows you to process a lot while not deactivating, but down-regulating fear response, if that makes sense. Part of the reason, and I'm not giving a neuro chemical or pharmacological explanation here, but MDMA can be incredibly effective for treating post-traumatic stress disorder. I mean, some of the results are unbelievable. I mean, if you look at the studies MAPS has been designing and funding and implementing in some cases, you have patients with 17 years, median 17 years or 17 and a half years. I think this is from their phase 2 trials, persistent PTSD, severe symptoms, who after 1 or 2 sessions with MDMA, granted, plus lots of integration and prep and post work with very highly trained, generally highly trained therapists who go from severe to asymptomatic after 1 or 2 sessions. Now, that raises many questions. And one is, how the hell can that possibly work? And I'm going to, I'm sure, bastardize this, and should probably have Rick Doblin on the podcast at some point to actually fact check and correct me on things, but I feel like I know what they're doing pretty well. And subjectively, I would say also from my experience that MDMA and certain compounds like it allow you to revisit trauma or examine trauma, whether lowercase t or capital T, from a somewhat detached observer perspective as an adult, so you can recontextualize and process that trauma without re-traumatizing yourself. And that's not always the case. And I should also say that MDMA, perhaps more so than psychedelics, is thought to be a love drug where it's always running through fields and handing each other flowers, and that is not the case. People can have tremendously difficult experiences that require a lot of triage afterwards. And I've seen a lot of video footage of actual sessions within the context of training, and people can have a very tough time. This can also open up Pandora's box, where afterwards people have said things, for instance, they feel tremendous shame about, etc. So it's not without risk. There are risks, but for people who have experience, I think that MDMA could possibly be a tool that helps them to downregulate fear and anxiety response and process some of what is happening to them in a way that allows them to be more sort of proactive instead of reactive afterwards. That doesn't mean I'm recommending people do MDMA right now, but I do think that if I had to choose between MDMA and psychedelics, I would probably choose MDMA.
Right. Well, I recommend that you wipe down the box that the MDMA comes in.
Yeah, difficult.
Clorox wipe.
The question of procurement is a whole separate topic that is probably best not discussed on a podcast.
Right. Stay 6 feet away from your MDMA dealer. Just lob the MDMA over the fence.
Yeah, right. So I suppose those are a few of my thoughts. But people are struggling right now. People are struggling, and I think in many respects, people are having a psychedelic. Millions of people are having a psychedelic experience right now, in so much as this set of crises and this pandemic has acted much like LSD as a non-specific amplifier of everything that's underneath the surface. And if you have mild anxiety disorders or tendencies to anxiety that can be managed under normal circumstances, there's a good chance that that is magnified right now. If you have a
forget about the health concerns aside. I mean, I think you and I are on the same page in having worried up until this moment that people aren't taking the health implications seriously enough. That really, it hasn't been that we've been too panicked by this. It's just that we actually haven't been worried enough early enough to take the steps that we need to take to actually get off these exponential curves and mitigate the spread of this contagion. But forget about the virus. If there were just some invisible force that were having the economic effects that we're now witnessing, that would be a civilization rattling form of stress for almost everyone. I mean, you and I are in uniquely fortunate circumstances in that, we're both well off and able to more or less work, almost as we were before. I mean, apart from not doing live events or anything else of that sort, we can more or less just continue going. But most people are not in that situation. And so even if there was just no concern about the possibility that you or anyone you love is going to wind up in an ICU on a ventilator, which is happening and is going to increasingly happen to many, many people, leaving all that aside, people are, understandably terrified about the economic volatility we're seeing, but it's not just up and down and up and down. It's in certain sectors just down and down and down and down with no end in sight. If you look at the service sector, if you look at restaurants, I mean, all of that is very scary, especially given the way in which it interacts with everything. It was just that the way in which our society is so lacking in resilience based on there not being a great safety net, even though we're trying to provide one on the fly here with trillions of dollars. And there's a level of wealth inequality that is just magnifying this problem. And then there's a political layer to it that is increasingly toxic, where one side of the aisle is fairly delusional in the degree to which they're denying the nature of the problem, and the other side is in the worst case, just willing to make politics out of a pandemic, and we can't even talk to each other about how to solve the most basic human problems. So it's incredibly stressful, leaving aside the actual reality of the pandemic.
It is. I've and you're absolutely right. I mean, we're in very fortunate positions. I have family members, friends who've been laid off from all types of jobs, not just service industry jobs. I think the service industry is the canary in the coal mine, and it's I've struggled. I've struggled with what to do to maximally help. Also, I know I've been sort of beating myself up a lot about not doing enough, or perhaps not doing the right things, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a lot.
Do you have people in your life, has this been happening one-to-one, where you have, friends and family members who you've had to burn a lot of fuel trying to convince to take this seriously, or are you talking just about your public messaging about it?
Oh, it's both. It's both. I mean, I think that because I discussed this publicly quite early, I want to say the first blog post I put up about it was the second or third week of February, which I caught a lot of hell for, and then the campaigning for cancellation of South by, which I caught a lot of hell for. So that was actually quite easy, because I had a high degree of conviction that this was inevitable on some level, given the mathematics involved, and the fine details of the metrics could be off, and the case fatality rates and this, that, and the other thing could be off. But even if they were off by 50% in either direction, nonetheless, I mean, the picture emerging was very clear to me. So I felt good about that. I think what's been difficult is having many of the people who initially didn't take it seriously getting caught on their heels in really bad positions with family members to account for and so on in different locations, who then came to me for help with everything. And I couldn't handle it. And by not handle it, I don't mean emotionally. I mean, it was logistically impossible. Hundreds of text messages. And it's just like, I can't take 6 hours with each of these people to get them up to speed. It's not physically possible. So it's been challenging, and I don't mean to make it it's not a sob story, because there are many millions of people who are going to be having a much harder time. And I guess the question that comes to mind for me to you and is, what would you recommend to people who are scared or suffering right now, recognizing there are real external factors to consider, but also recognizing that we often suffer twice, or suffer when we need not suffer, at least in our minds, by imagining the worst case scenarios and perseverating on worst case scenarios and being consumed by fear. Are there any recommendations that you would make to people who are fearful or confused in these times? I know that's very broad and maybe asking a lot, but how would you respond to that?
Well, I guess the place from which I'm, I can be fairly prescriptive is toward all the people who are in situations similar to our own. I mean, in the sense that, there are people who are in totally non-analogous situations to our own, for whom, the choice to stay home is not possible, right? In fact, it would be an abdication of their own ethical responsibilities if they were to stay home. I mean, there are people who, need to work in our ICUs, and there are people who need to deliver food and, they keep the supply chain running. It's like all these people are heroes for just doing their jobs. And so I view the ethical imperative to get out of circulation and not increase the disease burden and the burden on our healthcare system. That falls to everyone else who can do their work from home, who for whom being out in the world is not actually helpful to anyone. And so those are two very different sets of people. And so the people who are out there doing the necessary work of keeping everything running, I consider all of them, heroes whose way I want to get out of. Right, I want us all to get out of their way and not make it any more likely that they are going to get sick, or that they are going to be unable to if they're in healthcare, care for the people who are already sick, or soon to be sick, or sick now and don't know it. But for the people who can reinvent themselves, or step away from their careers and jobs, and especially for the people who are in fortunate enough positions to not actually have to sweat the financial implications of this in the near term. I just think there's a different set of ethical considerations that come online. I mean, I think we should just be looking for opportunities to help the people who are more vulnerable than we are. I mean, so. All of us have people in our lives who we employ, however peripherally. Just like take the person who cuts your hair if you have hair. I'll leave you out of this, Tim. But I still have some of my hair, and so it's just like, I know how often I get a haircut. Well, I know I'm not getting a haircut for I don't know when the next haircut's going to happen, but. Why not, buy some imaginary haircuts here and help keep the person who cuts my hair afloat during this period. So anything like that you can think of doing, right, to support people who are taking, in many cases, 100% hit to their economic well-being. It just seems if you're in a position to be able to do that, you should. Right, and that's and so I would just advocate that we recognize that we're all part of a system here. We're all connected, and in the most basic material ways, and we're all reliant on everyone else not breaking down and failing here, and so our effort to keep our world together can't be solitary. I mean, it can't be solitary at the national level, and it can't be solitary at the individual family level. I mean, it's just it can't be merely about making sure you have enough food in your house, because you can't possibly have enough food in your house so that you are no longer reliant on the supply chain and on the service worker who would, deliver the food from the market that you're now scared to go to. That person still has to have a viable, source of funds. And it's just to view our connections, to keep our connectedness to the people we know, certainly, and even the people we don't, more in mind here as we hunker down, as we should. I mean, again, I really do think it is an imperative for us to understand collectively. I mean, now speaking as with the country in mind. I mean, this can't even be a state by state effort. We can't. It's all of us who are out of circulation now are more or less just waiting for everyone else to get the message. Because if this is going to go on for a very, very long time, if we can't extinguish it and slow the contagion, over the next couple of months, and it's only by doing that, and then all the subsequent, testing and contact tracing, that we're actually going to return the world and the economy to something like normal. I mean, there is no rebooting of this economy with a contagion like this raging and people falling sick in the numbers that they will. I mean, we're just what we're going to do is just pendulum swing back and forth from trying to restart the economy and then realizing, oh my God, this is just too scary. Then I just saw a crazy documentary about what's really happening in the hospitals, and okay, now I'm going back into hiding, and we're going to have that experience on a collective level over the course of months, and it's just going to be needlessly costly in terms of lives and our economic well-being. Whereas the truth is, we could resolve this in something like a month if we had our act together. I mean, literally, we could lock down for a month and this would burn itself out.
If they did it correctly. Yeah, they did it correctly. That would require isolating in fever clinics or elsewhere family members who are positive from their families. Yeah. Sadly, but yes,
or family. So even in a worse case than that, just everyone isolating in their homes, and then maybe the rest of the family would get it, and then then whoever would have to go to the hospital would go to the hospital. But as long as we're 6 feet away from everyone other than our family members, and out of circulation, we could this thing could self-extinguish. It's just we're not showing any kind of aptitude for doing that because of the nature of our political conversation, mainly.
Yeah, and to echo what you said a little bit earlier, my impression looking at the confusion and hopelessness and frustration among many of my friends, and this is not limited to people who are as fortunate as we are. This is even lots of folks I know who say are gardeners or house cleaners who also want to help in some fashion. The question that I get very often from top to bottom is, which nonprofit should I give money to? And I think that will become clearer as things progress, but right now there are 1,000 chickens with their heads cut off running around trying to help and really confusing things. There are a few signals in the noise. I think flexport.org/donate is doing excellent work. OperationMasks.org I find interesting, although I don't understand all of it. But there's a lot of confusion. And in the meantime, there are things, as you said, that you can do to help just by focusing on the people you know. If you look back, just say a typical week from 6 months ago, what did it look like Monday to Sunday? And you can identify the coffee shop, you can identify the restaurants, you can identify people you may have paid for God knows what on a weekly basis, a monthly basis. Doesn't mean you have to feel obligated by yourself to subsidize all of those folks. But what you could do is ask the question that I was told was the most important at the beginning, actually, of a rafting trip, my first ever rafting trip. And Kelly Starrett, who's an incredible guy, the Ready State, incredible PT, incredible athletic performance coach, all around good guy. And he used to be an Olympic level kayaker. And he said to everybody who was on the trip, because he was co-organizing it, he said, the most important 4 words that you can utter are, how can I help? How can I help? If people are doing stuff and your hands are empty, how can I help? And what I've noticed, at least in having conversations with people I've offered to help, that oftentimes it's just asking, how can I help? Can I help you? That is in and of itself helpful. Does that make sense? It doesn't it doesn't have to translate to them accepting your help or asking for help, but just reaching out and making the offer and indicating that it's a standing offer, even if they don't accept it now, I think is tremendously psychologically helpful. So you don't have to wait for the perfect nonprofit to present itself. You can talk to those people who you already know.
Yeah. And it's also just worth remembering how disruptive this emergency is and how unique it is. I mean, this is by its very nature, this is dividing us from ourselves. I mean, this is separating people. I mean, just think of what it's like to have someone die now, and the decision about whether to have a funeral or not. I mean, in most cases, it's a straightforward decision of just not to do that. And just think of the implications of that. I mean, the rest of life is going on. And all the bad parts of life are still going on. People are getting sick and dying from causes that have nothing to do with coronavirus. And, all of that's being made more difficult. And just, deciding whether you have to see a doctor for some other reason now is incredibly stressful. And so there's just so much going on now that it's people are under a ton of stress. And again, it's almost perfectly designed to be hard to solve. It's not like initially the analogy to September 11th came to everyone's mind. It's like this is yet another intrusion of history. This is another moment where we need to wake up and realize, okay, the society destabilizing events are still on the menu, right? This is the kind of thing you're living through now that people will be talking about long after you're gone. But on another level, this is totally unanalogous to September 11th. I mean, it's a much bigger deal, and it's much harder to respond to intelligently. And it's not to say we responded to September 11th with much intelligence, but this is big, and no one alive has really gone through something quite like this. I mean, this is outside of everyone's lived experience. How to deal with this.
Yeah, and what I would add to that is that I don't know if this will be helpful, but speaking from a personal perspective, I've been beating myself up for not having clear frameworks for making decisions, not feeling clarity around many things, not knowing how to help optimally or being able to figure it out. And the fact of the matter is, it makes very little sense for me to beat myself up about that, because it is not, at least not always, reflective of a personal flaw. It's a collective experience that millions of people are having right now. This is very different from anything anyone living has ever faced. And that's not to say that the world as we know it is going to hell in a handbasket. I'm not saying that, but the circumstances and the problems and the challenges that have been created are very different from 9/11 or anything else that we associate with national or global crisis. Very, very different. So it's, I think, helpful to try to remember that. And I'm saying this as much for my own benefit as anyone else, to be gentle with oneself and compassionate if you can be, because it's not the difficulties that most people are facing are not reflective of any individual flaw. They are reflective of a terrifying and unique situation and the response of millions of people collectively.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, there's so many cases where it's not reflective of a flaw at all. It's just you're in a sector of the economy where, obviously you're getting zeroed out, right? Just because of the nature of the problem. It's like, just imagine, owning the best restaurant in New York City, right? You may not survive this interruption in your activity through no fault of your own. This really is like a stray bullet on that level that just hits you. So that's why we need. I mean, there are silver linings here. I mean, we need to notice all the ways in which our assumptions and our ideologies and our cherished notions about how the world should be are not serving us well here. I mean, you need to take the fashionable ideas in the tech community. I mean, there are a lot of people in tech who are either avowed libertarians or quasi-libertarians or just fans of Ayn Rand, but they have this basic idea that the government is useless, and the less we have of it, the better. We are really suffering under a lack of effective governance now, and there are certain lessons here that should be indelible. And one is, you can't rely on a piecemeal private response to pandemic, right? And it's not to say that we're learning a lot about what's wrong with the government and the bureaucracy and the level of red tape to cut through to actually do something as simple as order masks and other protective equipment. Some of the things that we're witnessing now are absolutely bewildering. The fact that there's still a role to be played by private parties in acquiring PPE, protective equipment for hospitals and first responders. I mean, it's crazy. It's like, why on earth does Elon Musk need to buy ventilators and deliver them to the state of California? Why isn't the state of California in a position to buy those Chinese ventilators or individual hospitals? It makes no sense, and yet, it's actually in this case, it's not for lack of money. It's just there's just a lack of agility on the part of government here. But whatever systems we need to put in place for the next pandemic, we really need to figure this out. I mean, this is as bad as this will be. And I think you and I agree here that we're still at the beginning of this thing. This is still a dress rehearsal for something that could be much, much worse, that on some level is guaranteed to eventually happen, whether it's in our lifetime or not. I mean, it's just sheer good luck that we're facing a pandemic that has the lethality of this one and not one that's 10 or 30x this one. So we have to keep an inventory of all of the lessons being learned here and do better next time. And so, I mean, there are several silver linings here. There's a lot we are learning, or at least potentially learning, and collectively, in response to just the need to have institutions that actually work, rather than just populist demagoguery that appeals to half of a society, and the need to have systems in place and supply chains, and not to be utterly reliant on other countries to produce necessary equipment and medicine, and to stockpile things that we know we will eventually need or could need in massive quantities. I mean, to speak of America in particular, I mean, we're the richest society that's ever existed, and we're scrambling to produce the most basic tools at the moment. It makes absolutely no sense. I mean, we should absorb, on some level, the the humiliation of this. I mean, you've got doctors in the finest hospitals in the country, covering themselves with bandanas. It's madness, and so we can learn these lessons. I mean, on some level, these are very simple lessons, and personally, many of us are having our priorities jiggered around by this, such that we're connecting with deeper values in this experience, and experiencing a silver lining to it in just the way in which we're prioritizing our time with our family, and just kind of resetting our career priorities. And I mean, there are many good things happening for people, which are not going unrecognized. I mean, it's just a question of figuring out how to maintain these epiphanies once life starts back up again.
Yeah. Well, Sam, I love our conversations. It's always nice to hear your voice. And
likewise.
This we will have many conversations over the forthcoming days and weeks and months, no doubt. And I appreciate you, and I appreciate your thinking. So thanks for taking time in your day.
Yeah, well, back at you, brother. Keep it up. You've been, I think you single-handedly got South by Southwest canceled, and it was the right thing to do. And we sort of pulled the ripcord together. I mean, maybe you had pulled it earlier in your life, but like when you and I made the decision, when we were checking back and forth with each other about, what was going to happen with South by Southwest, that was the moment where I was understanding the situation we're in, and you were, you were definitely the first person in my life who was echoing back to me the wisdom of that change in outlook. And so it was thank you for being early on this, and thank you for all that you're doing, because you have been a great source of information for a very large audience, and you just need to keep it up.
Thanks so much, Sam. I'll do my best. And it seems so weird to end this way, but I will. How can people find you? Where can people find you? What would you like to share before we close up?
Well, there are really only two places where I'm consistently making noise. I used to blog a lot, and I don't do that anymore. I mean, it's been years since I was writing regularly on my blog. But
you do have an excellent blog post on psychedelic, or related to psychedelics, though.
Right.
Also.
Yeah.
Oldie but goodie.
Drugs and the Meaning of Life, which is in audio form on both of our podcasts, I think.
It is.
But it's on my blog. But so my podcast is Making Sense, and the app where I talk about all things related to meditation and the nature of consciousness, and to some degree psychedelics, is Waking Up, and that's wakingup.com.
Highly recommended. I use it myself. And Sam, to be continued. Thanks again for taking the time. And I'm not sure what we mentioned that might end up in show notes, but if we have show notes, dear listeners, they will be at tim.blog/podcast. You can just search Sam Harris or Sam, and they will probably pop right up. And thanks for tuning in. Sam, always a pleasure, and I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, take care, brother.
All right, you too. Take care. Hey guys, this is Tim again. Just a few more things before you take off. Number one, this is 5 Bullet Friday. Do you want to get a short email from me? Would you enjoy getting a short email from me every Friday that provides a little morsel of fun before the weekend? And 5 Bullet Friday is a very short email where I share the coolest things I've found or that I've been pondering over the week. That could include favorite new albums that I've discovered. It could include gizmos and gadgets and all sorts of weird shit that I've somehow dug up in the world of the esoteric as I do. It could include favorite articles that I've read and that I've shared with my close friends, for instance. And it's very short. It's just a little tiny bite of goodness before you head off for the weekend. So if you want to receive that, check it out. Just go to 4hourworkweek.com. That's 4hourworkweek.com, all spelled out, and just drop in your email and you will get the very next one. And if you sign up, I hope you enjoy it. This episode is brought to you by FreshBooks. Thousands of listeners and a lot of the contractors I use and my readers use FreshBooks. If you've been thinking about turning your part-time side business into a full-time small business, or big business for that matter, you may be feeling some extra uncertainty these days, and that's obviously completely natural. There are a lot of questions that can come up. How do you create a professional appearance and experience? Who can help you with support? How do you manage the billing and all of that, but still focus on the primary work of your business and on growing your business? FreshBooks is an all-in-one invoicing and accounting solution. It does a lot more than that helps you take your business from part-time to full-time, and it only takes minutes to set up. They have one of the best sign-up flows in the business. I've seen very few better. They have been helping people turn their passions into small businesses for 15 years, and they can help you too. I've met the founders. I've looked at this product very closely. With automated invoicing, billable time, and expense tracking, and an intuitive dashboard that ties it all together, it's like having a full-time financial assistant with you every step of the way. You can create, customize, and send branded and professional-looking invoices in about 30 seconds. You get paid up to twice as fast, with fees as low as 1% using ACH payments on FreshBooks. It's a fast, easy, and secure way for clients to pay you for your work and pay you more quickly. One of the many things that sets FreshBooks apart is their award-winning Toronto-based customer service. A real person picks up fast and will help you until you are completely satisfied and have your questions answered. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world right now, but your ability to build a business that you're passionate about, that you're proud of, doesn't have to be one of those things. Business owners all over the world rate FreshBooks as the easiest accounting software to use. Try it out. Check it out for free for 30 days at freshbooks.com/Tim. Just enter Tim Ferriss in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Again, that's freshbooks.com/Tim to check it out and try it for free for 30 days. One more time, freshbooks.com/Tim.